great. Thank you so much for joining and
Absolutely.
time. If it's cool with you, I'm actually gonna flip our camera to horizontal because
Yeah.
it's better for the
How?
view.
Okay, hold on. Do I need to do any? What? I don't know what I just did.
I just physically put my phone sideways,
Okay.
like hot dog.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Mine. I don't sure if it's gonna. Hold on. Change. There we go. Okay.
Yay. Okay, perfect. Well, I'm so excited to have you on for today's sort of coffee chat.
Yeah.
I'm really happy I met you through Social Mama. So for everyone that's joining right now, this is Rachel Friedman. So you're a mom, you're a licensed social worker, so you got your
Yes.
master's from NYU,
Yes.
and you're actually the founder of Rachel Beth Coaching.
Yes.
Yeah, so I would like to just hear a little bit about how you went from that journey of social work and like what brought you into life coaching so everyone can get a chance to know you.
Yeah. Absolutely. So yes, I am a mom first and foremost. Actually, my husband and I have 5 kids together, so we are actually a mom of a lot of kids. I have two. My daughter will be 14 in a couple weeks, and my son is 16. And then I have triplets who are my stepkids that are all 17. So we have a really crazy house. It's super fun and a lot of chaos a lot of the time, because lots of hormones flying around all the time. And yes, to answer your question, how did I transition from the therapy world into the coaching world? And it's kind of an interesting, I think, kind of an interesting story. So, oh God, I guess it's been over 20 years since I got my master's in clinical social work. And I worked with adolescents for several years in a lockdown facility. Um, and I got burned out super quick, which I think is pretty common in
Yeah.
the social work world. And I found myself doing a lot of yoga, and I fell in love with yoga. And I actually ended up opening a yoga studio, and I owned a yoga studio for a decade.
That's a fun fact.
I know. A lot of people don't know that about me. So I taught yoga, I taught meditation. I still do, like on the side. And while I was teaching yoga, I like stumbled upon Brooke Castillo's podcast, The Life Coach School.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've ever heard of it. She's amazing. And I was like, oh my God, this is so much of what I teach in yoga. It's just like a more Western approach. And I was like,
Right.
I need to be doing this. Like, this is like my background in counseling combined with my yoga. This is like everything. Like, I felt like it just embodied everything I believed, and I was practicing myself.
Yeah.
And so I literally sold my yoga studio and started a life coaching business. And I did ended up going and getting certified through her, because even though I have a master's in clinical social work and I did, I practiced therapy for several years, I felt like I really wanted to be grounded and centered in the coaching tools as much as I was in the therapeutic tools, because there's a lot of crossover, but then there's also some big differences. And a lot of
Yeah.
people, honestly, I don't think they realize that, especially people new to coaching. A lot of people think it's going to be a lot like therapy, which I do bring some therapeutic elements. I won't lie. It's part of me to my coaching, but I also bring a lot of yoga to my coaching. And the coaching tools I just felt in love with because they're very actionable, and I'm an action person. And in the
Right.
therapeutic world, as much as I can talk to anyone, I could talk to a freaking wall. And I love that. I loved how in the coaching world it's like you didn't just end a coaching session with feeling like you got a bunch of stuff off your chest, but like your coach actually gave you things like homework to go
Yeah.
do throughout the week to practice. And I just got literally in like 2 years of coaching, the amount of growth just blew my mind compared to all the years as a therapist and doing therapy. And it's not to discredit therapy. I really, really think it's invaluable in a lot of ways. But I think some people, depending on where you are in your journey, need more of like the therapy, which is I see as more of like, if you think about a sport, right? Like if you think about baseball, for example, my daughter plays softball, that in the sport world, right, we have like the trainers that when you like, or the doctors when you like hurt yourself on the field that help heal you. And that's what I
Right.
kind of see therapy as. And then you have the coaches that elevate your game.
Right.
And that's why I just think I fell in love with coaching is because similar to yoga, it's a lot about like elevating your game in life.
I love like your passion too, and sort of like how you fell into this track. Like, I'm sure you went into social work with the same heart that you wanted to like help provide holistic care for families and really provide them, like you said, the tools. And so just for everybody that's popping in right now and joining, today's theme of our coffee talk with Rachel Friedman is coping in a crisis. Because we know for all of our parents out there, and even like you might be living it, in a household with 5 kids, this can be a really challenging time. And so we just want to provide an opportunity for you to drop in the chat. I'm monitoring it, and ask away any questions, or just, voice anything that you're going through, because we want this to be interactive and provide real tools that you can walk away with today. And I'll just, because not everyone knows me that joins the live.
Yeah.
So I'm Lauren. I'm a nurse practitioner, and I studied in my PhD the microbiome of preterm infants because, similar to you, I was really interested in a holistic preventative model for wellness. So actually I went and studied Eastern medicine in my bachelor's in India.
Oh my God, I love that.
Yeah.
I'm so jealous.
So I just thought it was really fascinating, because a lot of what you're saying, the translational part of coaching, is they pull from, Ayurvedic, which was like one of the oldest forms of medicine, and they really like make it accessible to the way that we provide care here in the West. And I think that having knowledge of both Eastern and Western modalities is so important, because that's how doctors are actually trained in India, is in both Eastern and Western medicine, because you want to understand, like, there's a really important role that pharmacogenetics has, and you want to know how these herbs and adaptogens are actually, impacting our neurotransmitters, and how that, plays a role with other drugs that you might be taking here. So I just love the synergy in this conversation. It seems like we really wanted to, start in like the absolute most preventative place, and provide that care to our patients. And so you're witnessing, because I know you're an expert on social mama, and so I do like primary care tools on there. And I could not believe the amount. There's about 60,000 moms on that app. And
wow,
the way it
there
works,
were that many.
Yeah, so the way it works is, for anybody who hasn't used it, you can connect with other moms, like based on, do you have multiples, or you have a baby with colic, or you can connect with experts, like Rachel or myself. And really most of what we're seeing is people just needing coaching through mental health crisis right now. And so I just wanted to ask you, like, what is maybe like the top 5 things that you're noticing parents are asking for help for?
Yeah, I would say the top 5 things I'm noticing that parents are asking for, a lot of it is, parenting and working, like trying to juggle the balance of kids being home, especially the elementary age kids who are home and they're trying to balance this work-life balance where they're helping their kids and they're getting them online and getting them their schooling and still doing their job, right?
Mm-hmm.
And being able to manage it all and not feeling so overwhelmed, like the whole world is literally crashing down on them, like not feeling like this huge heavy weight almost on their shoulders all day. And I find that a lot of parents are struggling with also the social emotional that's going on with their children these days. I have several clients that have come to me, and we spend a fair amount of time talking about the emotions of their children at all ages, because something that I think we often forget is how important the social interaction it is. I mean, social interaction is super important for adults too, but children, that is how they thrive. And I think a lot of parents are seeing how the pandemic is impacting their kids, and that's weighing really heavy on their hearts, and they're really struggling with how to help their kids manage through it right now. I think
Absolutely. That, and it's different in every state in terms of like, here I'm actually living in Canada now. I learned that
Ah,
there's cohorts of 30 students that you're just, you're mandatory, like paired with these people moving through the school year. And so I can just imagine I was actually homeschooled, so I just know how hard that would be if the school is like, this is who you're with. And we know how important play is for neurodevelopment. So, how are you walking parents through that specific struggle with, the weight they're carrying, with
yes.
realizing that maybe they don't have an outdoor space? Maybe they live in New York and it's really cold right now. What are some tools that you're providing for that specific challenge?
Yeah. So one of the greatest things that I had learned through the coaching world is like how to manage your own emotions. And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people don't realize that all of our feelings are triggered by sentences in our brain. So one of the great tools that I've been helping a lot of my parents with is you can't necessarily control the weather, right? For example, if it's really cold out and you can't get your kids outside, but what you can control so you feel a little less maybe overwhelmed or I don't know, frustrated is what are you thinking right now? Because what you're thinking directly impacts how you feel. So no, you can't change the weather, for example. You can't necessarily make COVID go away right now, right? Like obviously our society is working on that. But what you can control is what you're thinking about the circumstance. So
Yeah.
we know that like no circumstance is good or bad actually. As much as like even when I bring this up around COVID, people are like, Rachel, how can you say it's not, how can you say it's good? I'm like, I'm not saying it's good, but it's our thoughts about it that will determine how we feel about it. Because we know this because I might be like, I'm actually very much an introvert. So personally, in a lot of ways, COVID for me has been like, oh, it's kind of nice. Like I don't have to feel like, not that anything makes you feel so way, but like, there's no guilt if I never go out and like do anything because oh hey, I'm
Yeah.
being safe, right? But then someone else who maybe loves being super social all the time might be feeling trapped. And the reason they're feeling trapped is because of what they're saying to themselves in
Yeah.
their own mind. So one of the greatest tools I think that can help parents right now is start to really understand what are the sentences going on in your mind and do you like what you're thinking? Because if
Mm.
you don't like what you're thinking, you have total power and control to change that. And when you
Yeah.
change what you're thinking, it directly impacts how you feel. So,
Mm-hmm.
no, I can't say that you can go outside right now, but you could think something different like, oh, we can create, a fort inside. And we can create like when my kids were little, we used to have this thing called Box City. Like literally, you don't need any money to create Box City. You get a bunch
I
of
love
boxes
this.
and you let your kids color them, and then they like climb through the tunnels. Like literally, I think it was my kids' favorite thing for a good year or two, and it
Yes.
cost nothing,
Oh my
right?
gosh. And it can be some of the sweetest memories.
Oh my
Honestly,
god,
like we had Box City, we made little cars out of boxes and the paper plate was like the steering
yes,
wheel. And also like I had some regression going through nursing school where I was like, I just need to come home and build a tent. And like
right.
so I
And
think that is such a great tool that you're kind of touching on is really mastering self-regulation, I think,
yes,
first. And I was listening to some of your prior podcasts too, and you talk about non-negotiables. And I don't think that there's any way to start mastering self-regulation unless you really get okay with yourself about setting aside time for instance, like one of your tools is meditation. And I
yes,
think that word can be really, really scary for a lot of people because there are so many different forms. Honestly, it can just feel like, what the fuck am I doing? I'm failing
exactly.
at
It can
this
be
because
so
so
scary.
many thoughts are flowing through my head. So I would like, if possible, for you to kind of just touch on sort of how you set up that really tactical skill of setting aside time for self. Call it meditation, call it prayer, call it daydreaming while looking out the window, you know, and like what methods you found were helpful to make it stick.
Yes. Okay. I love this. So yes, you are 100% right. I love that you've listened to my podcast. That like makes me smile. So yeah, I do talk with my clients. One of the things we actually set up in our first calls is your non-negotiables. So I'm a big believer as a mom, as a business owner, it's so important that we fill our own container. So I call it like you are your own container. And if you aren't, when your container gets dried up, you have nothing left to give. And
Yeah.
as a mom, you know, and even someone who helps other people, like if you don't fill that container first, you're not going to have much to give. So the first thing I always recommend is let's pick 3 things for you that are manageable and doable, that aren't going to take a ton of time, that are going to nourish you, your soul, your well-being. And so for me, I'm huge in meditation. I started meditating, oh God, about 10 years ago. I think right around when I opened my yoga studio and I was so stressed out. I mean, like, right, new business owner, had like no effing clue what I was doing. I didn't know anything about business. I just knew I loved yoga. So dumb when I think about it now, but whatever, you learn a lot
Yeah.
along the journey. Learn so much about how to run a business. I was recommended, you know, in one of my trainings to meditate every day. And the way it was originally prescribed to me was terrifying. And it just seemed daunting and overwhelming. But because of that, I'm such a seeker, like a knowledge seeker, that I went on this journey to figure out a way that was going to work for me.
Yes.
And so there is a teacher, his name is Light Watkins. He has a book called Bliss More. And if you're interested in meditation, I highly suggest his book because he makes it really approachable for anyone and everyone.
Okay.
So with my clients, I suggest you start with between 3 and 5 minutes. That is it. Because the brain, when you start to get slow and slow yourself down and sit, it goes crazy. And
Yeah.
you're going to think you're doing it all wrong because you're going to have a zillion thoughts. You're not doing anything wrong. This is
This
just
is
the
natural.
mind. This is natural. This is what our brain, we have like 60 to 90,000 thoughts a day. So your brain is just like all of a sudden like, whoa, you're slow. Woo, let me speed up.
Yeah.
It does take time to get to that place where those thoughts aren't like swirling around, and that's okay. You're just not going to be there yet, and that's okay. So you're going to slow down 5 minutes and just simply be, sit, and observe those thoughts. So I like to use the analogy of I don't know, like I've actually never been scuba diving, but I can imagine what scuba diving is like. You know, you put on the harness, you put on your oxygen, you attach it to your face, and then you jump off the boat into the ocean, right? You jump
Yes.
towards the bottom of the ocean, and you have to focus on your breath, right? If you don't focus on your breath, well, you're probably going to die, I'm guessing, right? Because you need that oxygen to come in. Now, while you're focusing on your breath, you're going to look up and you're going to look around and you're going to see all sorts of beautiful sea life, right? But then when you look up, you might see boats passing by. And I like to use the comparison that the boats are like your thoughts. So they show up in your vision, you see them, but then before you know it, the boat has traveled, and now there's another boat, the bottom of the boat that you see. So it's
Right.
like nothing's gone wrong. You're just going to see it, witness it, let it send it on its way. Next thought comes in. See it, witness it, let it go on its way. And then every week, you grow your time by a minute. So then you eventually can sit from anywhere between 20 and 45 minutes. But that takes time, right? And some people need to stay at that 5 minute mark for weeks. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just giving yourself the space and the permission to slow down.
Yeah, definitely. We have some comments from the audience, but I love that, you know, you're starting with these non-negotiables and making sure you're giving yourself permission first. And Michaela dropped in and said, she was.
I know, I'm like trying to read them like
do you have any good tips for fighting burnout when trying to juggle all that life has to throw at us? Because she's also struggling with what you touched on with that brain buffer feeling.
Yes. Burnout's like a feeling, right? You feel burned out, because of the sentences going on in your mind. So in order to deal with
Mm.
burnout, the first step is you've got to understand, what are you repeating to yourself and over and over? Like, what are you burned out about? Then you want
Yes.
to ask yourself why. And once you have your why, then you want to ask yourself, what am I making that mean about me? Because the burnout, what you're making it mean about you is what's leading to you feeling burned out. And when you feel burned out, the actions you take reinforce the burnout. So when
Right.
you trace it back to the original thought or thoughts, and then we can
Yes.
understand the root, then we can start to learn how to sit with it, feel it, and then eventually transition to new thoughts.
Oh, okay. I love this. And I've just been taking notes as you're
Yeah.
talking because I want to make sure that I have everything to like recap for like the new viewers that are popping in.
Yeah.
So, first we're having to really master our self-regulation is the biggest thing. And a great tool that you mentioned that you keep in your kit of non-negotiables is meditation.
Yes.
I think of slightly different from just becoming that witness and stepping back and getting to know what that inner chatter is all about and what it's actually saying. And it's been super helpful for me. I think you do something really similar, but it's called Neuro Cycling. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, so just like in that time frame, maybe you like sit down for 9 minutes. You just like, witness like what sensations you viscerally have in your body. And then from there, just get curious and say like, okay, now what attitude do I have about that? Like this morning, for instance, my throat just felt like really tight. And I was like, I feel frustrated. But like why? And like what are my thoughts? That's the next
Yes.
step. Like what are my thoughts about this? And I was just like replaying a scenario where ultimately the problem was I felt unheard. And like your body is literally sending that signal and telling you that. But if you ignore it and you don't check in like all day long, that can really build and be expressed in different ways that are totally not relevant. And I love that you are providing moms with and parents or
Yeah.
anybody else who joins like really really practical measures. And I think a big difference, like we are having a wonderful paradigm shift right now in terms of mental health and seeking help because we're recognizing how many people are affected. And it's just another part of your body, right? Like brain matter, neuronal tissue, we're all having this collective human experience. So mental health is not a negative term. It's the same as your physical health, right? Like you're going to go
Absolutely.
work out and you're going to work those myocytes, those muscle cells, because you want to get stronger. And the same thing goes for your mental health. Like there's nothing shameful about, saying, oh, I'm feeling anxiety. Like I'm feeling anxiety today. And I know, like, Michaela, thank you for sharing. Like, you're going through it too, and you're
Yeah, we
experiencing
all
burnout.
feel it. It's like,
Right.
I think like a huge misunderstanding is that, we actually feel all emotions if we let ourselves. And when we're willing to feel all the emotions and not avoid or use like food and alcohol and other substances or social media to avoid those emotions, then as we process them, like you were talking about, like my throat is feeling, all restricted, and what is that, and allowing ourselves to be curious, like we actually become super powerful. Because then when you realize that, oh, I meant as a human to feel all those emotions,
Mm-hmm.
nothing has gone wrong. So much anxiety comes from when we think these emotions are wrong. And then we start to overthink
Mm-hmm.
and spin. And then we start to freak out because we think what we're feeling, we shouldn't be feeling. But what you're feeling is actually just a trigger. It's a signal to check in, to get
Yeah.
curious.
Oh, I love that. I love that so much because, there's a lot of times where we may have gone through conditioning. Everybody has a different environmental history and background, but there are different societal norms or like family norms that, especially in the female role, like smile more, be happy,
Yeah.
frustration's not good. And so myself, like I've had to really challenge like anytime I feel frustrated, you just compound it more when you're judging it, right? And like it only continues. But just knowing that, okay, this is like really a healthy part of the human experience, and just maybe I need to dedicate, an additional 5 minutes to really understand what the signal is telling me. Why did I feel unheard? And that's all tied to a core value, right? Like expressing yourself and feeling authentically heard and accepted is just such an intrinsic part of our human experience. So I think what I appreciate a lot about the term life coaching is like you're approaching caring for your mental health with a very positive, engaged attitude. So I think the way people think about therapy, and I think what deters people from actually talking about these emotions that we're experiencing, is that they feel like, oh, something's wrong with me, I need to go fix me. Like this is a negative
Yeah,
situation.
I agree.
And in reality, like we just need to be heard. Like this is therapeutic right now.
Yeah.
And connecting with other parts of the community is also so therapeutic, and we need this. But the thing that comes with life coaching is that you have somebody that is like keeping you accountable, and like you said, making sure that you have these tactile tools in your kit, whatever 3 things you pick. Like we went over meditation, neurocycling, and then just choosing to be very self-accepting of whatever comes up in that process. And like your toolkit might look totally different, but you have somebody that is going to have your back. And little by little, and I think you mentioned this before, as you just commit to that 5 minutes a day of whatever it was that you set aside as your non-negotiable in your toolkit, you build a sense of self-trust. And that is something I think I'd like for you to touch on.
I have a whole podcast on self-trust. It's a whole episode because I'm a huge, oh my God, I think it's such a thing that we just don't, a lot of us think we trust ourselves, but deep down, we don't realize that we've broken the trust with ourselves because, for example, our very primitive brain, the lower part of our brain, the animalistic part of our brain, it really is motivated from like desire, comfort, and ease. So
Right.
it is going to do everything as simple and easy and keep you safe, right? But that part of our brain is not the part of our brain that plans. Like I like to think of that as kind of like your toddler brain, where it's like it wants it now and it has an urge, and then it's like, I want a candy bar right now, and I'm going to throw a tantrum if I don't get it. That's like your primitive brain.
Yeah.
You have like your higher brain, which only humans have, that allow us to plan in advance. And that planning in advance is what allows us to reach and accomplish our goals in life. And you can say I don't have goals, but we all do. Maybe you don't verbalize them, but like that's part of being a human, is we evolve, right? We've evolved since cave time. We're always evolving. And it's like part of like the non-negotiables is like planning in advance. I'm going to do these things for myself. Now, your primitive brain, let's say in the morning, let's say one of your non-negotiables is to wake up, meditate, and exercise, and you're tired and you didn't sleep well, your primitive brain is going to say hit snooze. And it's going to have that urge and that desire to just not get up and not do it. But that higher brain, when you get up and you do it anyway, that's how you build self-trust. That's how you learn to believe in yourself. That's how you know you have your own back no matter what. And that is invaluable. That is what really can help with burnout. That's what can help us in terms of being able to fill our own container so we are able to be there for our kids, right? For our partners. And for ourselves, right? Because when you hit that snooze button and you don't get up and do the things you say you're going to do, you've just told yourself you're not trustworthy. That basically, pardon my French, you're full of shit.
Yeah, and like you register that, I think, in your subconscious. And I'd like to kind of like reverse engineer, because this is another tip, right, for coping in a crisis. So first we had, mastering self-regulation, Now we're talking about how to actually build that self-trust. That's really vital for this. And, where do you find yourself? Like, what's another thing that's coming up in the pandemic with parents where you're prescribing, okay, you need to work on the self-trust right now? Like, where's another problem area that you find this is vital for?
Yeah, I think with parents right now is setting boundaries.
Okay, so that was our next question. I don't know if you saw it,
I
but
didn't. I can't see them because, I mean, they're sideways, so I'm just like,
yeah,
oh, forget
so I'm
it.
like turning my head. But
Yes, boundary.
setting boundaries is really difficult for me, and I know for many others. Any advice for some of these specific things?
Yes. Okay, so I'm so glad that was a question because I have been seeing this all over the place. I think boundaries are always hard as parents. I think we've added some extra elements as parents onto our day in and day out. And so I think a lot of parents are feeling guilty, like, oh, my kids don't get to go to school or they're not able to be as social. So they're wanting to make their children happy. So they're
Mm-hmm.
letting go on some of the boundaries, but children need boundaries. Adults actually need them too. And
Mm-hmm.
when we don't set boundaries, then we start to end up feeling, right, like burned out and exhausted and overwhelmed. And that's why
Mm-hmm.
setting them and following through with them are at the utmost importance. So, in terms of setting boundaries, though, if you're struggling with setting boundaries right now, same exact thing. You want to go back to that emotional regulation. You want to understand, why am I struggling with setting this boundary right now? And I can guarantee you it's because it's something you are telling yourself in your own mind right now. Like, oh, I don't want my kids to be angry at me, or I don't want to pick a fight, or they're going to be upset and I want them to be happy. Like, but it's going to be different for everyone, right? Because we all
Yeah.
have different thoughts in our brain, but not setting the boundary likely is going to have a direct impact on your day in and day out long term. Like, of course, in the immediate, it's that primitive brain that doesn't want to set the boundary because it's just easier. It
Yeah.
feels easier. But long term, it's
Long
so
term,
important to
yeah,
set the
long term,
boundary, to
that's.
have your own back. And it's not even just for you, because think about it. If you're not setting the boundary because you think that's easier in the moment, it's going to make your kids happy. It's, like they just keep pushing the buttons. And the
Mm-hmm.
more they push those buttons, the further they can get. And the
Mm-hmm.
more you feel angry and frustrated and maybe pissed off, right? And then you start to think, well, my kids don't ever listen. Well, the kids
Right.
aren't listening because you haven't set and followed through with that boundary. They've learned
Okay.
they can get away with whatever they want to get away with. And children are going to do that. Just like adults, we do it with each other too. We push each other's buttons. We push each other's boundaries.
I really love these tools right now. And so I'm just going to repeat back what I heard for the listeners that are popping on. And we're talking about, how do we navigate some of the really challenging things and cope through this crisis where all of a sudden parents are not only becoming homeschool teachers, but
Yes.
they're like bearing the whole workload of their professional career. A lot of them, struggling to keep food on the table. Like financial pressure adds a lot of weight to a relationship.
Yes.
And so we're talking about how crucial setting boundaries is for mastering self-regulation and also establishing self-trust. And it just makes these relationships in our lives so much healthier. And I think everyone's intention is really to just be the best parent or the best professional that they can be. And I think like when you talk about boundaries, oftentimes it's just not clear where they're being violated. And it's not
Mm-hmm.
an intentional thing. It's not like, oh, I'm just going to be walked all over or like compromised. You don't realize where you're tripping up until that negative emotion comes up later on, like the
Yes.
frustration or like the guilt. And so I think a really important tool that you mentioned here was like, what is actually keeping you from saying no? Like maybe it's that kid is like asking for another popsicle and you are just so tired, like, because you feel like you haven't had support and you feel like you've been working for 12 hours and you want to be the good mom and you just don't want to deal with a freak out right now. And so, like, sometimes it's guilt. A lot is what I'm hearing from the
Yes.
parents that you talk to. And I'm not a mom myself, but I can absolutely relate to this, as I like to imagine that this company is my baby. And
Yeah.
so I'm learning a lot in this leadership role because I'm struggling with being a helicopter CEO, right? Like, I want to keep the team happy. I see that something needs to be done and I have a little time to do it. And when I'm setting up this pattern of overstepping what my lane, my assigned like role is, it's creating this norm that I'm going to keep doing that. And then I'm building up this frustration because I'm like, where were you? You didn't, or with a partner, like, you didn't put your stuff in the closet like you said you were going to. I'm here, I can do it really quick. But what is that telling you is I'm going to always pick up the slack, and that this is not an equivalent partnership, or that our like roles are blurred. And I think just like it doesn't have to be something where you're like, no, I'm not going to help, that's not my job.
Yeah.
But just communicating when that happens, like, hey, I noticed, for instance, like this email with a potential partner was like left unread. I went ahead and responded this time. I know you have a lot on your plate. Like clarifying when you're doing it,
Yeah.
instead of like letting it kind of build and build and build. Because you don't
I
want
think,
those lines
yeah,
to be blurred.
I think that's such a good point. I think communication is so key with boundaries. Like, they're very much hand in hand, because it's not that you have to always, like, your kid says they want another popsicle and you know, like, you're feeling exhausted and burnt out, right? And you just don't feel like dealing with it. Maybe your boss gave you like a bunch of crap today too, right? And you can only handle so much. And maybe you're like, yeah, I'm going to let you have this popsicle only because, like, just come up with a reason, communicate to your kid that this is not a regular occurrence. Because I can guarantee you, if it's not addressed and you're just like, yeah, go have it, then one becomes two, becomes three, becomes four. And then at some point you're like, where did I lose full control?
At some point, you're like, my kid has pre-diabetes.
Exactly.
Or
My
I
kid has
do.
had 8 popsicles today.
Okay,
I've
so
been
I
that
love
mom, so no judgment.
no judgment too. Yeah, that's another thing. Oh, hey, social mama. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah. I mean,
We were
I think it's like, this is like, I think one of the biggest things when you talk about like tips and like dealing with life right now, and always actually, as I think so many moms are so hard on themselves, and
yeah.
they have this belief that they're not doing a good enough job, right? And I think
Mm,
one of the greatest things you can do is remind yourself, I'm doing the best I can right now with the skills and the tools I have. And
mm,
I think so often we spend a lot of time putting ourselves down
yeah.
instead of lifting ourselves up. And if you're one of those moms out there who's putting yourself down constantly, the biggest piece of advice I could say that could help you right now is start to at least take a moment every day and acknowledge what you did do well.
Oh,
Because
okay.
so we spend so much time pointing out what we're failing at or what we're not doing well or how we messed up. But what
Mhm.
about what you have been successful at? Dude, you brought a human into this world. I mean, like, hello, right? Like, is your human alive and still fed? Okay, that's a few thumbs up, right? Like, yeah,
Yes.
you're gonna lose your cool. You're gonna yell at your kids sometimes. We all do. Like, I mean, I've been studying this stuff for 20 years. I've been meditating for 10 years, like every day. I still yell at my kids sometimes. We are all humans with human emotions, and give yourself a break. Like,
Yeah.
really stop expecting yourself to be this perfect everything, because that doesn't exist. It's just
Mm.
ridiculous. Like, I think with social media these days too, we can add so much more pressure onto ourselves that is so not needed. And it's
Yeah.
like, you can be like, oh, she's always doing everything. She's working full time and she's taking your kids to the aquarium and she's got this 4-course gourmet meal on the table every day. Okay, for every mom that's doing that, there's also the mom out there that's happy if their kids are eating, like, that they got a vegetable on their plate tonight. And guess what? It's all okay.
Yes. Okay. This is such a helpful fifth tip. And I think that, I mean, we broached this topic, coping in the crisis, to really focus on parents' needs, but I'm getting so much value from this
I mean, for
because
everyone, for all of us, parent. I mean, you are a parent. You're a parent to your company. I have a lot of clients who are also entrepreneurs. I'd say over probably 60%. And I tell them that their business is their second, third, fourth baby.
yeah, absolutely. It's something you care about that you built. And I think just to recap, because we have some new viewers coming
Yeah.
on, we were talking about really like some of the architectural themes that are consistently popping up for parents. And a lot of it is just feeling overburdened, like they have a lack of community. And we're talking about tools to help deal with some of this anxiety or depression, which, by the way, is so natural for like the
It's
human
actually
body.
it's actually what some people don't realize. We are all actually created with an anxious mind. That's how we thrived and survived. So like
Right.
sometimes people will come to me and be like, I don't understand why I can't get rid of this anxiety. I'm like, because you're human and you just haven't learned how to friend it. You're
Friend it.
Yeah,
Thank
like
you.
I
Thank
tell people
you.
all the time, like, you're arguing with it, you're fighting it, you're resisting it. When you learn to friend it and own it and embrace it, it's not going to be a problem. It's because you're making it a problem.
And the very first tip that you talked on too helps you with that. So like we talked about mastering self-regulation and tools with actually like creating that time. And don't be scared of the word meditation. It can look different for every person, but really getting committed to saying, this is a non-negotiable. I'm going to just set, if you'd like to term it as daydreaming,
Yeah.
like 5 minutes to just like be uninterrupted. And it's not selfish because, as you said, like you can be your absolute best self only when you are getting in touch and authentic with what sensations and what needs are coming up and what's being unmet for you. And, we talked about the neuro cycling, which we don't have too much time left, but we'll like write out the steps
Yeah.
that we ran over before in the blog that we write up from this podcast. And really, truly just being accepting of whatever's coming up because that is essential for building self trust. And building self trust is like why we need to actually set boundaries. And like a big problem with setting boundaries and keeping them is the guilt, like we talked about, that comes up. And really like getting clear and just being curious with yourself and asking like, well, where is that coming from? Like what is the fear? Is it like that I'm not a good enough mom? Is it that I am not smart enough? Is it that I maybe don't believe I have the capacity to do this? Like, and really getting to a point where you can build enough self-trust and recognize you don't nobody is there is no perfect,
No,
like,
does not
and
exist.
trying to eliminate some of that comparison too, like you said, because we want to evolve. We innately, like, this signal of anxiety is just like, hey, like maybe there's something you can do different here and you can grow. But like the pressure and the expectations that we put on ourselves really dictate how successful we feel at what we're doing. And if we just recognize, like you said, I love the tip, like carve out time to manage your expectations and realize what you did already to, like, I had a drink of water. Good, like
Yeah,
I nourished my body. Good job.
exactly.
I put a vegetable on my kid's plate, like, good job. Like, so little, I think we actually give ourselves, like, soothing credit, like you give your child positive reaffirmations, and you want to be able to start cultivating that in your inner chatter, right?
Yeah.
And then another thing was to really get clear in your communication and just like manage expectations, because so often when we are crossing boundaries, it's just simply like we're not really talking about like, hey, I'm taking on this right now. This is okay, but can you do it next time? Or like even asking for help when you need to
Yes.
without that guilt. With it. Because we are meant to thrive in a tribe. Like we need
Yes.
tribe and we need community. And so I'm super happy to have you on, Rachel, because like this is our way in COVID of like having people pop in and drop in questions and really cultivating that sense of community in the crisis. And so I love these 5 tools and we'll write them all out. But is there anything else that you wanted to really touch on in terms of like a pattern or a theme that you saw coming up? And there's like one crucial tool that we left off of our list.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of anything else that I've seen that we maybe have left. I mean, I've obviously seen I mean, obviously we're all a little bit unique and all a little bit different, but in a lot of ways we're all the same. And I think one thing you just touched upon is like we do need a tribe. And wherever you are, whether your tribe is going to be virtual right now, because depending on where you're living, right? Like I know some parts of the world, they're still in lockdown. Um,
Yeah.
there are ways that we can be creative and still connect. And it's so important to not isolate yourself, because when we isolate ourselves as humans, it actually exacerbates when we're feeling overwhelmed and anxious. So when you're feeling overwhelmed and anxious, it's so important that you do reach out and connect with other humans. You don't have to necessarily tell them everything and anything that's going on, but even just having a face-to-face, hey, how are you doing? Chatting about the weather, it doesn't matter, but continue to engage with other people.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for just taking time to really, destigmatize, having that conversation. I think honestly, as a society here in the West, we are getting better.
Yeah.
But knowing that caring for your mental health is as essential as is putting water in your body to fuel your cells, and that this process of anxiety popping up or depression popping up is really natural, and it just means that we need to like step back and become the observer and see what we can do to modify and improve our well-being.
Yeah.
And so I'm just like so inspired by this, because in doing the neurocycling process, I'm realizing so much more how key building self-trust is, because like a big thing that I know holds me back, and I know Michaela was dropping in the chat, is just self-doubt, and that's
Yes.
like actually unnecessary. And like it's so easy to compare, like, oh, this person is better at this right now and I want to get there. And it's great that you have like an inner intrinsic drive to grow and to evolve, but like how are you managing the conversation when self-doubt is really popping up? And for me, I'm just this week I'm I went through like a full 10 years and a PhD and studied like psychoneuroimmunology. I didn't actually graduate, I started this company, but
Okay.
that being said, like I'm still learning, and I was like, whoa, when this self-doubt is coming up, I'm entertaining it for like a really long time, but really I can just see it as like, oh, my body is giving me a signal to just remind myself, when was the last time I felt like I really trusted myself and I knew I've got this, and I knew like I have my own back. And so really tapping into a memory, like I think is just the only tip I want to add that's been helping me get through this week.
Yeah, and the only other one I would add is like sometimes we don't realize that our brains don't know the difference between a memory and a visualization. So if you can't tap into a memory, it can be invaluable to tap into like visualizing what it would feel like if you did feel confident, or if you weren't doubting yourself, right? Or if
Yes.
things were the way that you think they should be. And you can actually replay that visualization over and over, and you can actually begin to embody it by
Yes.
just visualizing it.
I love this so much. I'll just leave with this little anecdote. So, circling back to when I was studying traditional medicine in India, I had this amazing physician that was my supervisor, and he was 103 years old, Rachel.
Oh.
He, like, his only health problem was like a knee replacement because everyone gets in a motor vehicle accident over there. And I was just literally hanging on every word that this guy, I'm like, I need to learn everything.
Yeah, let me absorb it.
And that was, he had a little toolkit, and it was written in 1940, and so much of like our neurobiology is actually directed by that visualization.
Yes.
It's amazing because there are actual neurotransmitters that are changed when we get into that state. So, like, there's a study that was done that looked at self-reported self-efficacy. So when people think they're feeling confident, essentially, there are molecular changes. So it's called vasoactive intestinal peptide. It increases.
Okay.
Now, bear with me because these are,
I don't know the fancy
it sounds
words.
complicated.
I just know it works.
It sounds complicated, but we've measured this. Like, we've actually quantified on a cellular level that peptide binds to your cell where a virus would bind. There's a lot of virus going around right now, right? Like COVID-19. So what that means is that if the peptide's there, the VIP, a virus can't bind. So what does that say in short? If we're experiencing a state of calm, of ease, of self-trust, of self-efficacy is the construct like that's been scientifically defined, we are actually increasing our immunogenicity and improving our immune function.
Wow.
And so
if that's not a reason alone to practice this in this day and age.
I just think it's so beautiful because this medicine that has been like we know this is primitive. Like in 1940 they didn't have the technology to quantify that. It was quantified later on about the power of visualization. And so yes, getting to the point where you can see how you want to feel, how it look like, what is that state that you want to embody. Maybe I need to be more self-confident before approaching my partner about vacuuming on Saturday, right? Like, I don't know, but how do I really want to be? Like, what is the state I want to be in, and that energy I want to bring to the interaction look like? Like, what does it feel like? Is there a smell?
Like, how do I even sit or stand? Like, it's like even the little details.
Yes. And so I think that was like actually the most powerful realization. If there's anything I can translate from like 10 years of study, like
it's actually part of my morning routine. So like I created like a whole self-coaching like workbook. Like if anybody wants it, they can DM me. I'm happy to share it. And one of the pieces is actually taking yourself to that future version of you and spending a little time, like really not just visualizing, but like sitting in it and picturing all the details. And it's amazing.
Yeah. And if you're hearing this and you're like, wait, my problem is that there's not enough hours in the day,
and you want me to start sitting and visualizing,
and you want me to spend 40 minutes visualizing a future me, like just try it, just taste it. I mean, if the science doesn't sell you about increased vasoactive intestinal peptide and making you have a better immune system during COVID, like I just want people to feel better and to feel like they're at home in their body and they can.
I am 100% with you.
Yes. Okay, so we have a comment. Yes, never enough time.
Yeah, so time is something I talk a lot with a lot of my clients. We work on a lot. I'm not going to lie. I probably should have said that is the number one thing that tends to come up for people, to come up for people is not enough time. But the truth is we all have 24 hours in our day. We all have the exact same amount of time. And it's really what we choose and how we choose to spend our time. And there are a lot of tools, not a lot, but there are a couple specific tools that you can really implement that can help you. And actually, we tapped on a lot of them already, but the emotional regulation is a huge part of why we think we don't have enough time.
Yes.
I'm actually doing a free class next week in my Facebook group on time management. If anyone wants to join, they can just DM me and I'll send you a link. But time management is a big thing, I think, these days, especially as we've added for a lot of parents more onto our plates.
I think that that's a beautiful resource that you're offering. I'm probably going to pop in. And what we'll do for all of our listeners is let's share that event in our newsletter. So what day is it going to be?
It's Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern time.
Thursday. This week? No, next week.
No, this coming week. So what's today? Friday. So whatever the date is.
I don't know.
Even know. I'm like actually been in Florida all week visiting my parents. This is not where I normally live. It's actually really beautiful and sunny. I'm like in Palm Beach. And I know. And so it's I'm gonna be leaving actually this afternoon to go back to Atlanta where it's really cold. But yeah.
I heard it's super cold.
Yeah,
and
it's really cold.
I'm actually from Tampa, so enjoy the sunny weather.
I know, I'm about to leave it. So sad. That's why I was like, I'm doing this live outside. I don't even care that I'm like, you know.
No, this is great. This is how we like to host the Friday afternoon is really informal live Q&A with a specialist. And so, we'll get your event packaged up. We'll share it with anybody interested for the time management toolkit. If you wanted to share your PDF too, we can hyperlink that. That would be really helpful.
Absolutely.
And for anybody that's listening, I know we're getting on our last minute, but I just would love to hear how we can be helpful for you. Like, what kind of resources do you want to be seeing? Like, we talked about meditation. Is it like a guided meditation that we host as a live? Is it a guided neuro cycling? We would love to hear from you. And so even if it's not in the live, when this is processed as a podcast, definitely drop comments in the blog where we link that and just tell us what we can be doing to provide value for parents at this time, because we're listening. And it was such a pleasure and very inspiring chatting with you, Rachel. I love where your heart is at. I love that you started a yoga. Okay, so secretly, I just got my yoga certification.
Oh my God, that's amazing. It's such a great journey.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm looking forward to connecting more with you. Be on the lookout. Just